Next item.
Item 9D, adopt resolutions authorizing the city manager to execute contract amendments for professional services for the completion of the Crestmore Glenview Neighborhood Reconstruction Project. Resolution approving a contract amendment with BKF Engineers for civil engineering services for the Crestmore Reconstruction Project and increasing the contract amount by $68,000. Resolution approving a contract amendment with HB Consulting Group for project management, contract administration, and contract inspection services for the Crestmore Reconstruction Project and increasing the contract amount by $302,500.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, your staff report provides a fairly detailed presentation on the items of work that remain for the Crestmore rebuild project to be undertaken by the two contract amendments that we're here to talk to you about tonight. I wanted to give you an opportunity, however, via this presentation to get a bit of an update, not only about the work remaining and the cost of that work, but the schedule for that work and just an overall status report about the many different projects that have been undertaken in the neighborhood now as we see that the project is finally coming to completion, and we're looking forward to being completely done with rebuilding that very important neighborhood by the end of this calendar year. So I'll ask Harry Burrows, our project manager, to make a few comments.
Harry.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. So I wanted to give a little bit of background, as Connie just mentioned, on some of the completed projects to date, as well as the projects that we currently have in construction. So this exhibit here shows the neighborhood, and just as an overview, the area in orange, where the mouth of the canyon is, that was the first project that was undertaken after the event, and that involved reconstruction of some major retaining walls and slope stability and erosion control in the canyon. Shortly thereafter, we undertook the project that's shown there in red, and we took the opportunity, unfortunately there were no homes there, but it was an opportunity for us to replace a section of sewer line that was undersized. So we replaced that when we had the opportunity. The next project was what we called the Phase 1 water improvements. That's at the top end of the exhibit, and that's shown in blue. And again, this was an opportunity to provide some redundancy in the water system by installing 2 pressure regulating stations that allow the city to take water from a higher pressure zone and reduce that pressure and give us redundancy in terms of fire flows to neighborhoods that normally couldn't use that water at those higher pressures. Then shortly thereafter, the project in yellow was undertaken, and that was the Phase 2 utility improvements. This was in what we call the fire damaged area of the neighborhood, and that was a replacement of all of the underground utilities, storm, sewer, and water lines within those roadways. Then the next project that was undertaken was the Phase 2 utility improvements, and that's shown in the light blue, and the Phase 3 utilities. And that was essentially all of the underground utilities in the remainder of the neighborhood. So in addition to replacing all the existing water lines and sewer lines, we added a lot of additional storm drainage that wasn't there. So when this neighborhood was designed and built back in the late 50s, the technology for stormwater wasn't what it is today. And so this entire neighborhood had less than 10 catch basins to collect stormwater. We had large, steep streets that, several, 800 to 1,000 feet of streets that were all flowing down to one storm drain inlet. So we took the opportunity to extend storm drainage up to those areas with this project. Then we undertook the upper sanitary sewer lateral replacement program, and that has resulted in the replacement either by city contract and or private individuals replacing their sewers and getting reimbursed by the city of almost 300 actually 325 sanitary sewer laterals within the neighborhood, out of a total of 375. And that's in addition to the 38 homes that burned down. All of those laterals were replaced as well. And then we embarked upon the Phase 4 street improvement project. That's one that's currently in construction now, as well as the Earl Glenview Park. And that's the replacement of the old Tot Lot Park on the 2 locations that are shown here on this exhibit. So jumping into the Phase 4 street improvements project, that project is about 75% complete currently. We're in the process now of actually doing the final paving work. We just, the last week and a half, did the road recycling. It's a process called cold in-place recycling. I'll show you some photos here in a second that drastically shortened the duration of the paving work in the neighborhood. The work that we've completed to date includes all of the underground utilities. If some of the council members may remember that at one point in time we were considering doing some traffic calming measures, including bulb outs in the neighborhood. At the time we undertook the Phase 3 improvement project, we actually extended storm drainage facilities anticipating those bulb outs, which we later did not construct the bulb outs. So this last project had to do some remedial work to correct some of the locations of those underground pipes so that they would match the current improvements as opposed to the previously planned bulb outs. Again, we replaced the streetlight system, all new sidewalks, curb and gutter, and the recycled roadways I just indicated. So we're completing the paving as we speak. We started yesterday. We're going to be paving the asphalt roadway through next Monday. So again, we'll have the whole neighborhood paved out within 6 days from the start of the paving operations. The next work after that is we'll come back and all the intersections in the neighborhood, we're going to do stamped and colored concrete in a herringbone pattern that looks like pavers, so that it'll provide both a visual and aesthetic improvement in the neighborhood, as well as hopefully provide some traffic calming as well. The last steps will be the signing and striping work within the roadway, and then just some cleanup punch list items. We've had a tremendous amount of, I shouldn't say tremendous, we have significant amount of change orders in the project for a variety of different reasons, including underground utilities that were in different locations. For example, what the picture shown here on the right, we had to remove portions of the existing line 132 that we'd previously filled with slurry because it was in conflict with storm drainage facilities. We also took the opportunity to put a new subdrain system within the roadway. A lot of the neighborhood up there has a tremendous amount of underground water, both springs as well as just dormant water there. So we took the opportunity to construct a new subdrain system to intercept that water to help prolong the life of the new pavement structures. These photos quickly show the demolition of the sidewalk and the construction of the new sidewalk, curb and gutter. What's interesting to note here is both in this photo and some of the subsequent photos, the diversity of the interface between the back of sidewalk and each individual home. Some locations we had retaining walls, decorative walls. Other locations we had landscaping. We had decorative paving, pavers, and regular concrete. These photos show the recycling work that was just completed last week. And what this process did was, instead of coming through the neighborhood and digging out the roadway down to a depth of a foot or so and coming in with new base rock, which would have involved a lot of time, a lot of trucks, a lot of disruption, this process goes through and essentially chews up the existing asphalt and base material, injects a new asphalt emulsion in it, and out of the back end produces a new roadway that then we put our top wearing surface on, which is shown in the next photo. So this is, these photos are actually from yesterday. They show that freshly produced asphalt on Claremont. So what just describing some of the interface between the back of walk, we've had a lot of issues that we've had to deal with during construction. some related to the contractor's work and work that the contractor needs to come back and fix. Others, for example, this one, unforeseen condition. Many of the driveways out there, when they were installed or reinstalled, they doweled into the existing sidewalk with rebar. Our contractor, even though he saw cut there, when he went to remove it, not knowing that the rebar was there, the rebar, spalled and chipped the existing concrete. So, this is not an easy fix in this specific location because it's not plain concrete. So this is just an example of some of the issues throughout the neighborhood. Here are a few more. You can see some chips and spalling with some bricks and concrete driveways. This is just an illustration of some of the diversity, as I explained, diversity of the back of sidewalk location. So what's interesting about this project is, unlike most roadway projects, the back of sidewalk is where the private improvements we had to match. The existing sidewalk constructed 50, 60 years ago, over time, had settled and moved, and we couldn't build it back to its exact location because it didn't meet current ADA requirements. So we had to juggle the new slope of the sidewalk with the existing improvements, and in some locations it resulted in what's shown here in the bottom right photo, which is you see a little bit of a lip behind these pavers where we had to keep the sidewalk grade the same for ADA purposes. So there's a lot of these instances where we're going to have to go back and have gone back and dealt with these grade issues at individual property interfaces. The Earl Glenview Park is also under construction. Here's some very recent photos. The project's coming along very nicely. You can see the project signs are up now. We're looking at substantial completion in early September of this year. Substantial completion is when the contractor thinks that he's done with the job. Then we go through with a punch list and actually have him go back and correct deficiencies that we see. So we're probably not looking at a real completion of the project until October, but it is moving along quite well. The remaining tasks, they're outlined in the staff report, but real quickly, obviously we need to complete the construction of these two projects. We also need to construct some improvements at the mouth of the canyon. And I'll jump ahead to this slide. What's envisioned there is that this is an older photo. It doesn't indicate all of the vegetation that is now mature in this area. Back multiple years ago, we had talked about doing a replanting in the canyon, but talking with arborists and talking with the geotech, we don't really want to get on those slopes with equipment and with landscaping, and we don't want to introduce irrigation there. So what has occurred over time is what we'd hope would occur, which is the natural vegetation has grown back there mostly. Currently, and since the event, we've had a chain link fence there to keep people out. What we envision is putting up a two-rail wooden fence that's shown here along the edge of the roadway with a gate to allow our sewer crews to get in. There's a sewer manhole there along that gray area, that gravel road. And then do some streetscape trees that are shown just illustratively there. So that is the work that's planned at the mouth of the canyon. Instead of going out with a separate contract for that, we're actually talking with both our Phase 4 contractor as well as our park contractor to get costs for them to do that work, so we can consider doing a change order in those contracts for that work instead of going out for a separate bid to save time and hopefully money in doing that. We've got ongoing surface restoration reimbursements for the upper sanitary sewer lateral program. A lot of residents have decided to or had decided to wait and do their driveway repairs until after we had gone through with our new sidewalks because they didn't want us to damage their new driveways with our work. So those have been trickling in and will continue to trickle in over the next 4 or 5 months as people get that work done. And then we have final project record drawings, as-built drawings that need to be compiled for all the different phases of the work into one cohesive document. We also have a record of survey that needs to be filed. When we tear up the roads, we tear out a lot of the street monumentation. That monumentation has to be reset, and it's a requirement of the law for us to do a record of survey and file that with the county by a licensed surveyor. And then as we close out the project, there's a lot of archiving of all the records, not just the plans, but of all the things like design deviations and other documents, so that in the future, when someone asks, why did we do something, there is a file and a record that someone can go to and find things very easily. And then we're continuing to do ongoing coordination with the owners and residents through the rest of the construction and as we transition, to the end of the project. I'm not sure if this is real legible, but this is the schedule as we currently envision it, and we're pretty much on schedule as far as the individual tasks that are shown on the upper portion of the schedule for the Phase 4 project. We're currently in the final surface paving there that's shown. Actually, we're ahead of schedule on that. The green represents the recycled, which has been combined essentially now with the surface paving. So the next work after that will, as I described, will be the intersections and the final signing and striping, and then the remedial work that the contractor still has to do relative to some of the concrete and other issues that are out in the field. The park will be completed, as I said, substantially there in early September, with the closeout, hopefully being there by the 1st of October. And then we've got the ongoing reimbursements and the other work to complete the project. Real quickly, just a summary of the BKF contract amendment that's in your package. That's work that they have undertaken during construction and yet to be completed. Includes a significant amount of sidewalk and curb grade elevation review during construction. We had to do some minor changes in the roadway profile to correct some drainage issues, particularly up at the intersection of San Bruno Avenue and Glenview. There was a historical ponding problem there that we have since corrected with this construction. We've also, I discussed the record drawings, peer review that they will do because they did some of the original surveying up in the neighborhood of the consultant that's doing the record of survey and assisting in the final project documentation and archiving. And then the work that we'll be doing will be the ongoing project management, construction contract administration, and project inspection as we complete the construction projects. We've also got to negotiate the final change orders and resolve some pending claims related to some of the concrete work. Ongoing review and processing of the sewer surface reimbursements as I described, and coordination of the remaining work and the ongoing liaison role that we're performing up in the neighborhood as well. So with that, ends my presentation. I'll turn it back over to you, Connie.
So the recommendation tonight is to make amendments to the two existing contracts with BKF and with HB Consulting Group. Both of these contracts have been scrutinized to keep the dollar amount of the additional and final amendment to the very minimum possible. I think that Harry's done a good job in outlining both the complexity as well as the remaining work for this project, the schedule for the project, and I think we can all be glad that this is almost finally over. A project of this complexity and the scope in terms of both the area as well as the amount, the numbers of different pieces of the project is not one that maybe in retrospect we would have undertaken, honestly, even in response to the devastating consequences of the 2010 fire. It has been our interest and our strenuous work effort for the last almost 8 years, or I guess almost 7 years. We didn't get started on the rebuild immediately. It has been our effort and the work of under Harry's guidance, the work of his team and sub-consultants to make this process go as efficiently and as comprehensively as possible to get all of the work that we aspired to done in the best possible manner, with the ultimate goal of making this a shining example neighborhood, not only of an example of what new infrastructure can accomplish in terms of the longevity of a neighborhood, but also to demonstrate what this neighborhood and what this community is about from a perspective of recovery and resilience. So with that, we're recommending 2 contract amendments for BKF in the amount of, I believe it's
Yes.
$68,000.
Correct.
And for HB Consulting in the amount of $302,500. Again, these will be the final contract amendments, and we are very much looking forward to this project being done and tied up with contractors, consultants, and the like off of the site before the end of this year. Thank you.
Okay, let's go down the line if it's okay and just see if there's any questions. Irene?
I don't have any questions, but Harry, we're going to miss you.
Sorry.
It's been a long time, and I really appreciate all that you've done and all that your team has done. It is complicated, as Connie said, and I know some of the neighbors put some of their frustration and their anxiety on you, and you and your team handled it very well, so I appreciate that. And Connie, you were fabulous throughout the whole thing, from the very first moment that we called you or anyone called you and said, "Hey, did you know?" And from that moment till now, we couldn't have done it without you and done it the way you did. Jim mentioned some of the things that maybe a lot of people aren't aware of, all the efforts you have undertaken with pipeline safety, not just in San Bruno but in the state, but nationally. And I think we owe you and the country owes you a debt of gratitude that way. And that's I hope when we finally cut a ribbon someplace that you're able to come and help us cut that ribbon.
Thank you.
Laura?
As a newest council member, it's hard for me to give you a lot of feedback on this project and kind of the trials and tribulations. I will say that something of this magnitude, and one of the comments that was written in the report is that, that every vendor we work with, didn't do their part, didn't complete a job on time. And I can't imagine how you must have gone through this process and the sleepless nights and the worries and the frustrations. So I commend you for that, because this is, it was good to kind of get an overview of of everything that's happened, but there's a lot, and that doesn't even touch the surface. So thank you for your dedication and your work. I don't know, do we need to hire him permanently? Is that?
Well, for the project management that we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
If you
Let's stick to this one. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
So thank
Michael, anything?
Yes. So I have to say that I am disappointed that it's taken us this long to get to this point, and the city manager made similar comments. And when we undertook this, and I was part of the council that made some of the decisions early on to expand the scope and allow it to drag on, and it was to the detriment of the neighborhood, and it impacted the residents there for far too long. So I am thrilled to see that we are this close. There's plenty of blame to go around, both up here on the dais and to the people, that were advising us, and our desire to do the right thing, and in some cases possibly some bad decisions, but here we are, and I am very, very glad to know that we're close. The dollar amounts now they seem to be more contained, and I'm really hoping that we don't encounter any more surprises at this point. And I also want to thank Connie, all of your effort on this, Harry for your involvement throughout the years. It was a difficult project. Trying to rebuild this neighborhood with the neighborhood already on top of it, it's like changing a car tire with the car running. It really was difficult, and so I appreciate the complexity and everything that has been done to make sure that the residents that their needs are addressed, and I think Harry, that you have done a good job at that. So thank you for that. The one question I had, I noticed that the park sign is up, and the Parks Commission had asked about the naming of the parks. Looks like that's already done for Earl Glenview. So I guess at this point it's probably too late to bring up. But the Earl Glenview sign is actually not at the corner of Earl and Glenview. It's up the street from there. I don't know where the decision came from, or there was ever any discussion about what the park name should be, and I think that name was the name of the tot lot that existed down the street before, and it just carried over.
That is correct, and that name and that sign and the lettering and what have you was developed as part of the construction plans. So. The short answer is yes. The intent was to rebuild the park that previously existed, and that park was closer to the actual intersection of Earl and Glenview. But keeping that concept the same and replacing rather than making something totally different was the interests of the neighborhood. Go ahead.
Well, if I may, just to clarify, there's two elements of the park, or two portions of the park. There is one that is still at Earl Glenview. I know it doesn't really address what you're speaking to, but we do have an Earl Glenview portion of the park, and then we have the portion that's up at the intersection of Glenview and Claremont.
Okay. All right. So as long as the community accepted that as an appropriate.
Well, that is my understanding, and I'm not aware that we've received. The sign has been up now for at least a few days, if not a week.
With no complaints.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Marty?
Harry Burroughs, I think I met you at the beginning of all this, right? Is that how it worked? Is that how it worked that long ago? Right?
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time. So I got a couple questions. Congratulations on getting the paving to where it is now. I wish I had got a chance to see that. I am interested in the financial analysis of doing it that way compared to doing it the old way, and what we learned from that, and maybe how we can apply that. Maybe the scale isn't going to work out for us. You need a larger area, but if you could provide at some point some financial analysis of what that linear foot, or square foot, or however you could provide that, I think that would be helpful for us to go forward with our paving. So when, and if we can get back to your schedule there, because rarely does construction projects blaze through schedule like you successfully have done. The colored chart. Right. So when we put this the bid package together, or this contract amendment, if final service paving is going to be done by the end of this month, is the final concrete and stamped intersection is going to be moved up in August?
Yeah, so we've got about a contractor says it's between 3 and 4 weeks of cure period on that asphalt before they can come back and stamp it. So the process is actually heat it up and stamp it and color it. It's almost like a paint, but it actually absorbs down into the asphalt, so that the color doesn't wear off. So yes, that red bar will slide a little bit to the left,
almost a month.
Correct.
Okay. And so my thinking there is this amendment, that included the less inspection time that's going to be needed? Because I mean, it's amazing that you guys got that much work done. So
Yeah.
if the work is done, then you don't need as much inspection.
Yeah, I mean, if we finish the project sooner as far as the actual field work, then yes, the actual inspection time will be less.
Right. And so and I'm envious because if that paving is completed by the end of July, and the only inspections that are occurring is the park construction.
Well, we've got the park construction, and as I indicated, we have some issues that we're still in discussion with the contractor with relative to some of the concrete work, and we have produced conservatively 10 punch lists on the concrete that we're still working through with the contractor. So given the size of the site and the amount of work that it takes to, inspect all of these locations, as well as over 300 connections of curb-through drains with properties that still have to be resolved to the satisfaction of not only the property owners, but also contractually and financially with the contractor. We've got a lot of detail work that's still left. I wish it was a matter of just finishing out the paving and then we're done, because it would make our collective lives a lot easier. But unfortunately, there's still a lot of time and effort, and that's represented in that last bar, that dark blue bar there.
On the closeout, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned the change orders. What range of costs are you anticipating?
So I'm not sure if I pointed out on the earlier slide, but the project included almost a little over $1 million worth of contingency because we anticipated a lot of interface issues with the properties. Right now, the change orders that we have received to date from the contractor are in excess of $500,000.
Okay.
We are in the process of negotiating those with him. We've gone through the first round on the first half of that, so about 300,000 of them, and we're in the process of trying to hone that number down. But again, that's part of that closeout. It's going to be a process. I am hopeful that overall we're going to bring. Well, I am very hopeful we're going to bring the project in much below the overall project contingency. Of $1 million.
So the last, just want to make sure I understand the last sentence here in the fiscal impact of that the remaining amount of money, the 5.6 million, I'm a little worried about is expected to be just sufficient to cover, that just word. I mean, how much play do we, we're talking about 100,000. Talking $500,000, talking about 50,000.
Yeah.
Today, because it could change, because there's still a lot of things we got to do, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't like to even hazard a guess today until I get through the final negotiations with the contractor on these change orders. And again, we're in paving right now.
Got it.
We're not done with the project, so I'll be happy to provide more clarity 60 days from now.
Okay.
So if I might, I actually wrote that, so maybe I could tell you what I was thinking here, and that is the additional information that's in the fiscal impact. We actually do anticipate that the total project is going to come in, and what I mean by total project is not just the construction, but the total end amount of the use of the $50 million that was negotiated with PG&E for restitution, recovery, and response. We expect to come in just under $51 million. We have approximately $750,000 that the City Council wisely set aside that was a reimbursement to the general fund for full-time staff that was earmarked for any overage in the overall $50 million trust fund budget. So at this point, we are anticipating that it's going to be very, very tight at those combined amounts, just under $51 billion.
Okay. Final question is, for those trees that are going to need to be planted, have you contacted Parks to see if they could put those trees in?
Well, we also have to run irrigation to those trees because there's going to need to be an establishment period. So we have had discussions with Parks related to the design and the concept of it. We're actually talking with the landscape architect for the park about the feasibility of running an irrigation line off the controller for the park down there for a temporary period of time until those trees get established.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you for answering the questions and presentation. Appreciate it. We have two separate resolutions. Any action by council?
I'll introduce the first resolution approving the contract amendment with BKF Engineers.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell. Aye. Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Davis.
Aye.
Mayor Medina.
Aye. We have a second resolution.
I'll introduce the next resolution approving a contract amendment with HB Consulting Group.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell. Aye. Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Davis.
Aye.
Mayor Medina.
Aye.